Ah,
Okay, there we go. Okay. It's Vach. It's your. Hope everyone had a wonderful Yom Tif. I
hi.
hope you all had. I hope you all had a chance to review from the beginning. From the beginning.
I don't
I
mean
don't
from
mean
the
from the
beginning
beginning
of
of
Menachos.
Menachos.
Oh boy.
That's what the Seder is all about.
I'm
I'm
sorry,
sorry.
is it possible? Let me try shutting this. Okay, are we good now?
Yeah.
It's coming twice still, it's not closed. Sorry about this. I can't hear anything. This doesn't want to end. Okay, now there's just one of me finally. Sorry about that. Okay, we're recording still?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we are on the Mishnah on Daf Ayin Tes Amud Beis. We're starting the real heavy-duty Menachos. This is what I've been looking forward to, quote unquote, from the beginning. I don't know if I mentioned about my PTSD about Tmuris and Vladis and Chata Shemesa. So that is what that's what we're holding by. But the Mishnah, Vlad Toida Utmurasa, three things. First of all, the Vlad of a Toida, right? We know a Toida is a carbon that you bring along with 40 chalas. So what if that Toida, that carbon, has a child? It has another little shepsela, a lamb. Utmurasa, another din, another way you could replace a carbon is by, if someone says, I'm making a tmura, I'm exchanging my carbon, which is another one of those examples of things in culture that people do that is very foolish. The Torah says you should not make a tmura. But even though you shouldn't do so, if you did it, it has an effect. And the new carbon that you've assigned as a replacement gets kedusha that is similar, if not quite the same, as the original carbon. Or hifresh taida, someone separated an animal for his taida. This is a third example, va'avda, and it got lost. Hifresh achares tachten, then he separated another one in its place. Eina te'una lechem. All three of these quasi-taidas, so again, the vlad taida, the child of a taida, of an animal, or the tmura, an exchange that you made for the taida, or if you had set aside a taida and it got lost, then you got another one in its place. And obviously you found the first one, and now the question is, what do you do with the two of them? So this new one also has a status as a taida. All of these, eina te'una lechem. All of these are going to be Titus, but they're going to be, like we said, a quasi-Titus that they're not going to have the accompanying lechem. They're not going to have the bread coming along with it. Shenamar, v'hikrav al zevach ha-Titus. Says, the Torah says, he should be makrav on the zevach the Titus. Ha-Titus tuna lechem v'loi v'lada v'loi chilufa v'loi tmurasa tuna lechem. The Torah is telling you only the actual Titus needs lechem, but not all these extra things, not the tmura, not the vlad. We don't do it in the same order that we originally did it. Not the vlad and not the chalufa is the same thing as chalufa means an exchange, not the one that was lost and you got another one in its place. All of these do not need lechem. Zak the Gemara, Tan Rabban, Mahu Omer Toida Yaakov. What does the Torah mean when it says Toida Yaakov? Now, the Torah doesn't actually say Toida Yaakov. The Torah says Imal Toida Yakrivenu. But as we're going to see in the Gemara in a minute, we darshan both from the fact that it says Yaakov as well as that it says Yakrivenu. Those are two limudim. So we're first going from the first limud. The third didn't have to say it all. And Toida, Imal Toida could just say. What else are you going to do with it if not be makriv? So we're just talking about the fact that there's any word there. So what do we dashen from that? So how do we know that if someone separated a tie, then it got lost, and then he separated another one in its place? The Nimtzis Harishan, he found the first one, the original, and both of them are sitting in front of him. So this was the case in the Mishnah, the third case that we had in the Mishnah. How do we know they can be makriv whichever one he wants, the lach me'ima, and the lechem together with it? Tamalayma ha-toida, Yaakov. There says the toida should be makriv. Now in the Mishnah we had said that
Don't you makriv, don't you makriv the one that you don't makriv the one that you found, but you makriv the new one?
Not necessarily. There's no you can do whichever one you want. That's what we're learning out from here, that there's no requirement. Both of them were separated as Titus, and they're both eligible. This is making me nervous. I'm getting a sign that there's no internet, even though we're on Zoom, so that's weird. I'm afraid something's going to go wrong. So no, you get to pick, you get to choose. So then the Brisa continues. Maybe I would think, okay, so we said you can do whichever one you want and you can bring it as a carbon, but maybe both of them, you do both of them as Titus, and the second one is the same as the first one. It also needs, you also bring it as a Taida, and it also is a full-fledged Taida that needs lechem. Torah says Yakrivenu. Only one of them should be hukrav as a full-fledged Taida. The other one, you just makriv it, but you don't bring the lech. So we have a ribuy and a miyat. We have a ribuy that says.
But you have to be makriv both, or is it a choice?
No, you do have to be makriv both because they're both separated as. Yeah, they have nothing else to do with it. What are you going to do with it? It was separated as a Taida. You have a choice of which one you want to do first, because that one will also have the lachme Taida with it. The second one is not going to. So the Bryce, once the Torah has made a riboy of Toida Yaakov, and then Yakrivenu of only one. Minayin l'rabas v'lodas l'chalipas utmuras l'hakrava. How do we know? What does he say? So the Rash says, how do we know that this, like Rob was just asking, how do you know they also makriv the second one? Talmud Leimer imal toida. That's where, so that we have a pasuk that tells you also. I'm sorry, I think that's what Lucy just asked. That you makriv the second one because it says al toida. Yachal yitunis lechem. Maybe the second one should also need lechem. Now the question is, we just said that before. What are you now? All of a sudden, what are you asking? So Rashi in the Ksav Yad explains it means that the original one was only on chlipin. How do we know it applies as well to Vlad and Tmura? Maybe those need lechem. Tamalem v'hikra al zevach ha'toida. Toida doing lechem v'loy Vlad v'loy chilufa v'loy Tmurasa. He says, even though we already said chilupa, but we just threw it in agav. That's what the Rashi says. But the reason for this is to tell you Vlada and Tmurasa. Tunin lechem. Okay, so let's get what we came out from this brisa is that all three of these cases of replacement Titus, the din is that you bring, in the case of the Tmur, you have to bring the original one. In the case of the Vlad also, I think we'll see about the Vlad. In the Chalupin, you can pick whichever one you want, but in any case, in all of them, whichever one is done first, whether it's voluntary or whether you're required to do one of them, the second one is not going to have the chalas going along with it. It's just going to be a taida without the chalas. Shalach Rav Chanina Mishmeder Rav Yochanan. Rabbi Chanina said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Lo Shanu, and this is talking about the chalipin. Lo Shanu La'achar Kapara. This is only if you're going to bring the second carbon after kapara of the first one, then we say that the second one doesn't bring a taida. But if ne kapara, tunin lechem. But if it comes before the first one, if you do it before he brought the original one, then it's going to need lechem. So this is obviously problematic. What is this case that was saying that it depends on whether it's before or after kapara? Heavy bar Rav Amar. Rav Amar asked, Ahai. When was this statement of Rabbi Yochanan's saying that it depends of whether the second one is going to need chalas? When is that going to depend on whether the first one already achieved kapara, whether the owner achieved kapara or not? If you say it's talking about a chalipin of a toida that was brought as a chayv, meaning the way Rashi in the Ksav Yad explains it. Chayva in this context means one that he brought where the person was mechayev himself to bring a taida, as opposed to where he said, I want this animal to be a taida. We've seen many times the difference between someone who says harei alai or harei zu. Someone says it should be on me that I'm making myself responsible for a taida. In that case, if something happens to his taida, he has to replace it. So that's what we're calling over here a taidas chayva. And not where he said harezu, I want this animal to be a taida. If something happens to it, then the owner is not responsible to replace it because he just made that animal into a taida. So he says, if we're talking about where the person took upon himself that he's bringing a taida, and that's what we're talking about. The fnei kapara, it's going to need. It needs what should we call it? Then he does it with chalas, and after he doesn't, that's exactly what we just said in this brisa. We said the first one that you bring by chalipin needs chalas, and the second one doesn't. So what are you saying? What are you adding by saying lifnei kapara? It needs a chala, and afterwards it doesn't. That's exactly what we just said in the brisa. There'll be no need to say that. And we understand, the Rashi understands from Rishonim explain how, but really it just comes from the Lashon. It's mashma that the Brisa is talking about a case of chayva. So we know it's talking about a case of chayva, and it already said, we're talking about chalip and taida, and we said that before the first one needs chalas and the second one doesn't. So
But how would I know that just because of we already had the Brisa? That would have been if he did the one that he had to do first. The second one doesn't need challah. But if he didn't do it already, then this is a novel ruling.
What part is novel?
That if he didn't do there are two animals that he has to do, that he could do, right? And we said by the chilufa, right? He has to do the original one first. He has to do the original.
We didn't say that.
We said you could choose whichever one you want.
You can do whichever one he wants.
Wasn't there one case that he had to do the that he has to do
by the
Tzmura, right?
By the Tzmura. But we're talking about the chalupa now. We're talking about chalupa where he lost one and he's exchanging it. He got a second one, and now it really doesn't make a difference. I mean, the point of Rabbi Yochanan is not really dependent on which one he's required to do first. His point is whichever one he does first, the second one doesn't need a chal. And that's our Mishnah, when it talked about chalipin, was talking about a chalipin of a chayva, where he said harei alai. And it already said this din, that you don't bring a chala on the second one.
So you're saying this thing, is just telling you in a roundabout way that only one of them needs lechem? Sounds like a very...
Well, that's the kasha. So what was Rabbi Yochanan? Rabbi Yochanan's an Ammayra. Why would he repeat the halacha that we already said if the Brisa directly addressed a chalufei chayva, and it said that this din, that you have to bring, you only have chal on the first one and not on the second one, it's just a repetition of what the Brisa said. That's the Gemara's kashas. We said both of these rules. That the first one needs a challah and the second one doesn't. So Gemara suggests, we're going to talk about something that wasn't discussed in the Brisa. Where he said, Hare zu. He said, I want this animal to be a taida. So the Gemara on that, both of them in that case are going to need lechem. Why? There's no such din of a chalipin, of an exchange of a harezu. If you said, I want this animal to be a taida, and then that animal got lost, there's nothing telling you to go separate another one. If you separate another one, that's a new taida, because the responsibility does not lie on the person. It's not on the gavra, it's on the chefza, to make it very kutch and briskish. But it's a very simple concept, right? If you're just saying, I want this animal to be a taida, and it's gone, then the chiyuv is gone. There's no second chiyuv.
You don't have to bring a new one. You don't have to bring a new one. So the second one you bring is a whole new taida. You can bring two taidas. So he's bringing two taidas. But they obviously, if it's a new taida, it's going to need its own lechem. So that's again that's not a possibility that's what Rabbi Yochanan was telling us, because the halacha is just wrong. It wouldn't make sense that the second one wouldn't need challah if we're talking about where he said Hare zu. It got cold again here. You know we were cold over Yom Tov. You're in Orlando, right? You know, we're quite resentful of you. Got like 40 degrees here. Who's in Orlando?
Menachem Kirschbaum.
Yo, I muted myself, so don't be resentful. There's like 500 people living on their own roof, so.
Yeah, but you probably have nice weather though.
Yeah. Yeah, it was nice. It was a nice day today, though. Can't complain.
Yeah,
today was
it was
nice.
nice, but then it got cold later in the afternoon.
I don't care. I kicked all the grandchildren out of the house. We locked the doors for like 2 hours, so that was very nice. Took a nap.
So yo, what are we up to?
We're 3 lines down from the top on Pei Amid Aleph. So we're trying to understand. We saw in the Mishnah, and we saw a Brisa, the rule that a taida, when you have a taida and its replacement, we talk about various different ways that it can be replaced. The rule is that the first one that you bring when you have two, like a taida together with its replacement, the first one you do with challah, and the second one you do without the chalas. And Rabbi Yochanan said the same thing, really. He said that if you do kapara, before kapara you need challah, after kapara you don't. So we're trying to understand what case was he talking about that was not addressed in the Brisa. So Ella avla taida nedava. Elamai, it's talking about not chilupin of a taida where it's exchanged, but where the taida gave birth. You had a taida set aside, and it's a taidus nedava, right? Where he just said hare zu, and it gave birth. So, but since it gave birth, it's at this point our assumption is that it's talking about. We'll see, but it's because it's going to be over lav yarachima. It has its own chiyav as a taida because it was given birth to by a taida. So for the Gemara on that, ben lifnei kapara ben lacha kapara ein tunin lechem. Moised the taida. This new vlad is not going to need the Rabbi Yochanan's statement that the vlad, what he says that it depends on whether it's lifnei kapara or lacha kapara. This is moised the taida. A vlad of a taida is something that's extra. It's ancillary. It's something that grows out of the original taida, and therefore it's not going to be true what he said. What he said that Rabbi Yochanan said that lifnei kapara it needs challah doesn't make a difference. Even if you would bring this vlad first, it would not need challah since it's what we call a meiser de taida. Let's see if we can see the lashon of Rashi of what he says meiser de taida. The 4th line in Rashi Ksav Yad, Yiseir Shagal Al Torah V'Lav Toida Atzma. It's like it's a growth, it's a branch off of the original Toida, which does not itself have a din of Chal. So we reject that possibility. Ella Avlad Toidas Chayva. Elamai, so we're forced to finally say it's talking about a Vlad of a Toidas Chayva, where the person said, I'm obligated
to bring a carbon. So we say lifnei kapara ton lechem, la kapara ain't ton lechem. So there, Rabbi Yochanan's statement will be true that it depends on whether the mother was brought yet or not. So what is the chiddush of this? So or actually and we're also going to say when we're saying my kamash, we're really going to explain what the theory behind this is. Why would it need bread if it's brought before the mother? So the Kasav Rabbi Yochanan Adam Miskape B'Shva Hegdish. When a person says that I am bringing this carbon, I'm chayim myself to bring a toidim, and he dedicates, he consecrates, he's mekadesh an animal to be his toidah, and then at that point, once he was mekadesh it belongs to hegdish, and now this child that was born was shvach hegdish. It was something that Bezdin really was the one that profited. It's something that increased by hegdish, but Rabbi Yochanan holds a person has an entitlement when he's mekadesh something, he could use what it increases while it's in the hands of hegdish after he's mekadesh it to fulfill his obligation. So before his kapara, he can use this vlad as the actual taida, and therefore would need lechem. Once he's already miskaper, then it's too late. Then he already was mechaper, so now it only becomes it becomes like a meiser taida, and it reverts to the rule that it doesn't need to bring chalas along. Abaya came to the same determination that the meaning of Rabbi Yochanan when he used mechalik on a case of a replacement taida was also, he said, it's talking about this same case of a taida that had a vlad, so that where it was a taidas chayva, and therefore the bailim, if they're going to use the vlad before the kapara with the mother, then they do it with challah, and if not, they do it without challah. Itmanami Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef Rabbi Yochanan, very just basically saying over this same din. First, we're going to repeat the analysis or the brisa that we said at the beginning of the Gemara. He said that chilufei toidas nedava. So right, we just went through the analysis of what Rebbe was talking about. So the first thing we said was chilufei toidas nedava, where he exchanges a toida, that where he said harezu. So ben lefnei kapara ben lach kapara tuna lechem mara b'toidasu. That's a whole new taida, and therefore it certainly needs its own lechem. It's a brand new taida. Vlad toidas nedava ben lefnei kapara ben lach kapara ain't tuna lechem. Moisa the taida, like we said, if it's a chalupin, if it's a vlad of a toidas nedava, so where he's saying harezu. In either case, he doesn't have any obligation, the owner, so it can't be like we said that he could be Yitz's Chiyuv with Shvach Hegdish, because it's not what he promised. He doesn't have any obligation in him at all. So ain't Ta'an Lecha. Ma'aser the Taidu, it's just something that increased in the Taida, it has nothing to do with the owner. Like Rabbi Yochanan said, that's going to be the case, like we just said, the vlad of a taida is chayva, a taida of harei alai. Amar Shmuel. Now Shmuel decided this is not complicated enough. He's going to throw a whole wrench into this. Amar Shmuel. Kol shebechatas meisa b'toida ein tuna lechem. Kol shebechatas raya b'toida tuna lechem. He says two statements. There's a rule, a halacha l'moishe misinai, which comes up throughout Kachim, and we've come across it before. We say kol shebechatas. There's a special din by a chatas under 5 circumstances. A chatas has to, rather than being tiracha to starve, instead of being put out to pasture, the common English phrase which comes from these gemaras, tiracha, you starve, that you put it out to pasture until it gets a mum. There's a din by a chatas that it has to die, and it comes from as a zikaron, as a symbol, the words timna, which is a chatas, tmuras chatas, if someone exchanges chatas, he said, I want it to be replaced with this new animal, which is not effective, but it just caused problems. So now this tmura is not, the din is it's going to have to be put to death. And mesa baleh, if someone separated chatas and the person who was supposed to get the kapara from it died, so now there's no purpose to this chatas, there's no purpose to bring it. He can't get a kapara after misa. And the nun is, what is the nun? The nun is, let me think. Let me just do it the way I remember. There's also this chatas avru shnasa. I think that's the last one. That's the ayin. A chatas that you're only allowed to bring a chatas that's less than a year old, and he brought one that is more than it passed a year old, so it no longer can be brought. So again, it has to be mace. There's also vlad chatas. The chatas has a child, and then finally chatas in skapru baleh ba'acheres, which is I think that's the nun. So the nun is a chilupe chatas, which is what we've been talking about. So included in these things that are chatas, that we say chatas has to go lamisas instead of being put to pasture, are the three things that our Mishnah mentioned. It has tmura, it has chalup, and it has vlad, plus it has chatas over shnasa, and it also has a chatas she'niskapru baleh. Okay, so that's Kol. He says whenever you have those rules by a chatas, if those things would occur to a toida, they're not going to lead lechem. Kol shebechatas raya, but in those cases that are not included, where chatas would have a din, not like we just this in these 5 cases, but where the chatas would be raya, the toida tuna lechem. If that would happen to a toida, it would need lechem. Motzei Rama. Rama asked from our original brisa back at the beginning of Hamoed Bay, at the end of Hamoed Bay. What is the brisa? What does the pasuk mean? It says that Yaakov meaning nine lemafshtei dasav of the v'hivshachas taktel v'nim tzurishena v'yishtein this minayin she ezmehen she yirtze Yaakov. Where do we know that it could be bring whichever one he wants? Which was, I think, the question that we were asking before. Where do we know chalupin he could pick? So that's what the brisa says directly. The lach ma'ima. And he brings it with the lechem. So Torah says you bring whichever one you want with the lechem. How do you know that the second one, once you got your kapara, that the second one you do it without lechem? From the word, it could have said Yaakov, didn't have to say anything. It should, once it said Yaakov, that teaches you that you should bring the first one with the lechem, whichever one you want. The second one tells you that the second one you bring, with mamayit, doesn't come with the chal. Echad v'lo shnayim. That tells you only one, but the second one you don't bring with chal. Fact the Gemara. So that's what we saw from the brisa. Bilu gabichatas ki ay gavna. Roya. We're saying that this second one you bring without lechem. Shmuel had said that wherever the din is by chatas, that it's roya. The din is that it's not going to, you're going to bring with the lechem. But where you just said that this you bring with lechem, and in this case it would be roya. So the second rule of Shmuel should really kick in. That he says whenever by chatas it's not from those 5 things, where the din is that it's roya, if it's equivalent situation by taida, it's brought with the lechem. And this l'chayr is not true. The Tanan. Hivish chatose. Where do we see by chatas? In that case, it's roya. Hivish chatose v'avda. Hivish acheres tachteh. If you lost your chatas and you separated the chatas and it got lost, and then you separated, so therefore you separated another one in its place. And you found the first one. And you have both of them in front of you. This is talking about chatas, not a toida. This is the new din that we're talking about. Miskaba b'achas mehen. He could use whichever he wants for a kapara. Ushniya Thomas divi Rebbe. Rebbe says it dies. So Rebbe is not a kasha. Rebbe is taka good for us. But the Chacham say this rule that a chatas sheniskapar baila is limited. It's not under all circumstances. It's only in the case where the new animal was found after the original. The original bailam was found after the bailam already was miskaper with the new one. But if they were to find the original one before the bailam were niskaper, right? In that case, the animal is not getting nisa. It was not pushed away. It wasn't an animal that was eligible to be used, and then he decided not to use. Whereas it wasn't available at the time, so therefore it's not as dachi. It's not as pushed away, and therefore the din is raya as opposed to mesa. So l'chayra, this is shver. So we see according to this, we follow the Chachamim over Rebbe. They're the Rabbim, and they're saying that in this case, we said it in the Brisa. We said it as a. It's always the case by a Taidu, whether it's before or after Niskapru Bailim. The rule is that the second one you don't bring chalas with it. But over here we're saying that if you find the original animal after you already niskaper with the second one, then the first one is raya. But according to Shmuel's rule, whenever by chatas it's raya, by a taida it should be brought with chala, and according to Shmuel it's not. According to the Bryce it's not. So tomorrow Shmuel karebi svirle. Einachanami Shmuel has to be going like the other man Amar, even though we normally go basa the Rabbim. Rebbe Shmuel held like Rebbe. The Amar avuda b'shas afrosha mesa. He says it doesn't make a difference whether it was found before or after the kapara. If it's lost at the time that you were mafresh the second one, so it gets misa. That means even if you find it after you're already in iskaper, it still gets misa. In fact, the Gemara, meaning Shmuel had said that when mechalek, it depends on whether the din by Toida will be the same. It's dependent on it, but it just Shmuel was saying a way to remember. He's saying they happen to have the same din. He said whenever it's roya by chatas, the din is not going to have lechem by a Toida. But that presupposes that there is a case of roya by chatas. But according to Rebbe, Shmuel is saying he holds like Rebbe, but Rebbe doesn't seem to have any example of a chatas that's roya. So tomorrow, no, there is an example, even according to Rabbi, if someone had set aside two chatoyas, but not where he lost one and then he went to find another one in its place, but from the beginning, he made two chatoyas, he said, I'm nervous that something's going to happen, so I'm setting aside two just in case. So he'll have it at the back. On that, you say tira. That's not something that was pushed away at all. It's not at all a second choice. That was always its fate that it was supposed to be there as a back. So since it's not so pushed away, the din is that it's yirachi yisto if it gets put out to pasture. Fact the Gemara, but this is going to be a problem. You're saying that's the case of Tira, and that's what Shmuel was talking about, where Rebbe says, where does Rebbe say Raya? In this case of where he put it aside for Achrayas. But the problem is Taida, even in that case, it's not going to make a difference that he made it Achrayas. It's still not going to need Lechem. It's still going to be Meiser Taida. It's still considered to be a Chalupe Taida, which we said there's no difference why it became a Chalupin. If it's a replacement for another Taida, it doesn't have Lechem. So if you say Shmuel's like Rebbe is still going to be left without an explanation or without an example of his second rule that Shmuel said that whenever Kol Shebechatas Uraya is B'Taida, there's Lechem. Because this is not an example. So Shmuel Kerv Shimon Svirli. He holds like an even more stringent version, not like Rebbe who says by Achrayas that it's Raya, but like Rav Shimon, the Amar Chamesh Chatoyis Mesis, he says all there is the Chamesh Chatoyis Mesis, and there's no case of Raya. Raya Rav Shimon, less like Klal. Yes, you haven't really helped things at all, because we said there were two statements of Shmuel, And we said the second state of Shmuel is saying that whenever by Chatas it's Raya. And we're saying according to Shimon there is no Raya. So you just made things worse. So tomorrow, Shmuel Nami Chadikamer. Kol Shabbachadas Mesa, the Toida into the Lechem. Einachanami, all Shmuel was saying was the first part. It was a mistaken attribution to him. Someone wanted to be smart and they added in. He says, Kol Shabbachadas Mesa by Toida doesn't need Lechem. And they said, oh, but the opposite is also true. But it wasn't really true because there doesn't exist such a thing going to Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon holds that everything, the only cases by Chatas, they're all Maces. Those 5 cases, everything else is also Mace. In fact, if that's the case, my Kamashmalan, then what is Shmuel telling us? That Kol Shabbachatas Mace. If everything is Maces, so we're saying that any time you replace a carbon Toida, it's gonna, what you replace it with is not gonna have Chalas. So Gemara lefukim der biyachim da adam miskab mishvach hegdish kamashmal on the line, right? We had quoted at the end we had said that what was the case of where it's ton lechem la'achar, where we said it's ton lechem la'achar lefnei kapara. And that's talking about where it was a vlad of a toidas chayva. So that's what that was talking about, and that Shmuel is being chaylik on that. He's saying we don't have an example. He says that even in that case, there's not going to be lechem, even though Rabbi Yochanan had said before that there is. Rabbi Yochanan had asserted that by a vlad of a toidas chayva, because he holds that it was dependent on the fact that the adam is kapah b'shvach hekdesh, and that's considered shvach hekdesh, by a toida that had a vlad. Shmuel disagrees with that, and that's what he's trying to say here. Amar Abba, zu toida v'zu lachem. If someone says this is my toida and this is the lechem, he separated both of them. He said this is my toida and this is the lechem. Avar halechem maybe lechem acha. If he loses the lechem, he can still continue on and get another lechem to replace it. Of the toida, but if he lost the animal, ain't maybe toida acheres. He can't bring another toida. My timer, meaning together with this bread, he can bring another toida with new bread, but this bread cannot now be transferred to the new toida. My timer lechem leglal toida vein toida leglal lechem. The lechem is the accompaniment of the toida, but the toida is not the accompaniment of the lechem. So you can't have something that is an accompaniment then be moved over to a different toida. It doesn't have its own place. But the other way around, if you have a toida and you lost if you lost the lechem, you can bring another lechem because the main thing is still here. You still have your toida. But Amar Rava, another similar type of din, hifrish mois l'toidasa. He set aside money to buy his toida. And there's money left over. Maybe behen lechem l'lachmei toida. He could go use the money to buy maybe behen lechem. He could buy lechem with that extra over money from the toida. Lachmei toida v'noisrosa. But if he had set aside money for the lechem, ain't maybe behen toida. He can't use that extra money to buy a toida. My timer. Ilay mishum of kahana, the amar kahana. You can say because of kahana, the amar kahana. Minayin l'lachmei toida shenikru toida. Where do we know that the lechem of the toida is called the toida? Shenem b'virkav al zevach hatoida chalis matzis. We call al zevach hatoida chalis matzis. So we're calling the chalis also toida. So that's the reason why we were saying that you can buy the chalis with the leftover money from the toida. Ihachi ipchanami. Then let's say the other way around. Why can't you buy the toida? We're saying the toida is called, the chalas are called a toida. So why can't you buy the toida with the leftover money from the lechem? So Gemara, no. Lechem, ikri toida, toida le ikri lechem. You could say a toida and be referring to the lechem, but not the other way around. You can't get the lechem and call that the toida. V'amara, hivish toidasa v'adav, v'chaza hivish acheres tachtem. It was mafresh a toida and he lost it. And then he was mafresh another one in its place. And he lost the second one also. And he got a third one in its place. V'nimtzu harishonis, and he found both of the original one. So we'll call them A, B, and C. Very on this, and he has three of them standing in front of him. So niskapa b'rishoina shniya eina tuna lechem. We said that then that a chalipin does not need lechem. So we'll say if he brings the first one, the second one does not need lechem. Shlish is tuna lechem, but the third one will need lechem because the third one was a chalipin for the second one, like he's going to say. Oh, well, let's wait till the end. Niskapa b'shlishis, or if he was makaper, if he used the third one, C. Shniya eina tuna lechem. B doesn't need lechem because it's a chalupim for the shlishis. Rishayna tuna lechem. The first one will. Bemtsoyis, if he does the middle one, shteyem ein tunas lechem. Both A and C will not need lechem. So I don't remember if the Gemara explains it or Rashi, but so the explanation is that the one that's an exchange, that we said that the exchanged one, the exchanged taida, doesn't bring lechem. But if you're miskapa with the first one, so the second one is exchanged. The third one is exchanged for the second one. The second one was not brought as a taida; it was brought as a meiser taida, as a replacement taida. So it doesn't have the din that it generates that its chalipin should have a din. Its chalipin becomes a standalone taida, and therefore it does bring with the challah. And that will be that. But in the case where you did the middle one, both the one before it and the one after it are both it's chalipin. He could exchange with any one that was near it, but one that's one step removed is always going to be a standard. Abaya Omar afilu niskapa ba'achzmen shtein ein tunas lechem kula chalipin dehadodinu. Abaya disagrees. He says no. In the end, you have three standing in front of you. Whichever one you pick, that's the replacement. Even if you brought one tide and you lost it, and you brought a second, and you lost the second one. When you get the third one, that's a replacement both for the first and the second. So to say it's only a replacement for the second is really semantics, because it's really a replacement for everything that was lost. Thomas Shlishis Tira. We're going to have the same din l'gavi chatas. Like we said, chatas pretty closely tracks the din of chalis by a taida. We said that whenever there's going to be bechatas mesa, and by a taida it's going to have chalis, and when it's not mesa, then when it's tira, then it's going to not have chala by a taida. So we're saying whichever with the chatas that is a chalipin, it's going to have it in the mesa. But the one that's not a chalipin, it wasn't a chalipin for the one that you actually brought, right? If let's say you brought the first one, the third one was not its chalipin. The third one was a chalipin for the second one. So we'll have a din of tira instead of Thomas. He'll say the same rule will track. Abai will disagree the same way he did by Toida. He'll disagree by Chatas because they're all chlipping of one another.
How do you explain Rava and Rav Zera, the story behind when they decide that they cut it? Who gets the lechem or who gets the?
You mean Rav Zera?
Yeah.
The Rava said it by Toida.
Yeah, exactly.
So what was this? What was the theory why it only is going to apply? Let's say if let's say it's A, B, and C, right? Let's talk about first Taida, right? So you want to talk about Rava in the case of Taida. We'll leave Chatas on the side. So you set aside A to be a Taida, and then it got lost, so you set aside B. So B is the chalipin for A. Then B got lost, and you set aside C. So according to Rava and according to Zera and Chatas, we would say C is only a chalipim for B. It's not a chalipim for A. A is in the distant history, but in the end you ended up bringing A. You found everything, and you brought A. So C was not a chalipin for a taida that was actually brought. It's a chalipin for B that was never brought as a taida. So it doesn't get that din that it loses its chala. The losing the chala, it's a chalipin. It wasn't a chalipin for a taida that was brought. It's a chalipin for a taida that wasn't brought.
I guess that's what I'm asking. So C then just becomes the regular taida?
I
So like,
wouldn't say
what's the
it's a
reason?
regular taida, but
Right. So Lamaisa, why bring lechem? Like I'm not. That's the part I'm missing.
you're asking that what is its technical status? What happens with that middle one? It's brought. We set a restriction, and you can bring as many taitas as you want. If we set a restriction that if something is brought as a chalipin, as a replacement for another taida,
Otherwise,
that
it's just a Meiser Nadava, seems like, which we said is not a
it's not.
problem.
It's not. But I
Right.
don't think
Yeah,
it's.
but
I don't
but
think it's
listen,
really a meiser nedava. I don't think it's this. Could
The
this could be
closest thing
even?
to it,
But this could be
no?
even where he said hare alai, where he's responsible to bring. He made a but he separated this as a taida now, and he
But
already was
the
yaitse
concept of
his
it
chiyuv.
is meaning like it's not an issue. You can just bring more.
yeah, but then why do you bring them? Then why does it need a lechem? Then in economy, it has to be brought. But why do I need
Because
to
it's
make
a
an special
taida.
lechem?
Taida has a lechem. Isn't that what it seems like it's saying? Like it's just like
Yeah,
there's no issue with it.
I think it's right. I think it really is. It basically is a new taida. Let's see the Rashi. I think the Rashi in the regular Rashi, not the Ksav Yad, explains it. Skaper Rishayna Shniya into the lechem, which he Chalipe Taida Rishayna. Shlish is tuna lechem. The loy have a Chalipe Taida. It's not a replacement of a Taida Rishayna. Umarbe B'Taidasu. It's so Ramish used the lashon that we used before for an independent Taida. The Avagav the Chayvihi, even though it's talking about the Bryces, we're talking about where it was said Hare Alai, and it became the Tani Behifrish Acheres. He was mafresh, so it's not really like you can back away. I feel like it's no longer chalipin, it's an independent title. So I think it's pretty clear cut, like you were asking that it's mamishnu. So Zak the Gemara, so the Gemara asks, my bechain, why are we saying that the din by chatas if it's really pretty clearly the same din? The by the din of Rava, where he's arguing with Abaya, we could say that it's a brand new title. There's no. This is why I was resisting you a little bit, because by chatas there's no such thing as adding an extra chatas. You don't get to bring an extra chatas. So I might say in that case, everyone would agree that it's always going to be a dysfunctional chatas, and it's going to be mesa, even according to I guess it was Rava, who was the chaylik on Abaye over there. I'm sorry, not Rava. It was Rav Zera, I think. Rav Zera was the chaylik on Kamash Malon that it's still not gonna have a din chlipin. It's gonna have the same as the Taida, that it's only when it's a mamash chalipin in its place that we say that it has a din mesa, but if it's a chalipin of a chalipin, then it doesn't have the din mesa. It gets a din of raya. Okay, we'll start. The next Amid is a puzzle that has 8 potential answers. So I think that's more appropriate for tomorrow morning. Even
What
though
time we
we've
starting
fallen
from?
quite a bit behind. So good to see everyone. Does anyone have any issues or requests as far as timing